Okay, 2-pound bowls. Bowls.
2-pound moles.
So is that a 2-pound?
Yes, that's a 2-pound.
That wheel's so quiet.
It's not even
That is.
on. Well,
We're going the wrong way, aren't we?
no, you're going the right
Am I
way.
going the right way?
My right way.
Ah,
Ew.
you must have been sitting over here, were you?
Nope, this one.
Oh, were you?
This is my baby.
They want to go the other way first. Or maybe I always get on one that sounds like ours get on.
Oh wait, I'm always on this one. Always on this one.
We have to make sure that Artie leaves a little note saying that I was here last.
I was on, so when you were.
And you go the other way?
Hey, don't leave me out of this.
Okay. Has anybody tried coning?
Yep.
Yeah? Does it help a little bit? Yeah?
Yeah, that's good.
So you're pressing together with the bottom parts of your hands there?
Yeah, I'm kind of squeezing up and I'm kind of extending my thumbs because if you probably noticed, the clay will just sort of start moving everywhere. You want to support it. I'm exaggerating how high you'd really have to come up to cone. And then it's just pushing back over a little bit off center. And then when it compresses up, you're just kind of more pressure straight down.
The purpose of combing is so it's kind of more wedged.
Yeah, it's a way of wedging, compressing the clay. Okay, so just like the mugs that you're going to be doing and the cylinders that we were doing, some of you may have realized that if at this point, if you've got a mass of clay that's a lot wider, you're going to have a cylinder that's a lot wider when you start opening it up, right? So right at this point, you start thinking about the foot of the bowl. How wide is it going to be? So think about that, how that informs this, and you may find you've got a more of a taller mound than usual, than a low, wide one. So Ari was talking about what was it called?
Oh, a blade.
A blade. So a blade would have probably a wider mound, okay? So, same sort of approach as a cylinder. Just going to go. But in the cylinder we go to about the thickness of a pencil. On a bowl you want to probably open up to about 2 pencils so that we can allow a foot to be trimmed on there. So that's a generous amount.
Halfway
Okay.
through the pin tool.
Yeah. I'll maybe take that down just a bit. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm just going to compress this, round it. So on a cylinder, we want to start in the center and then drag back to us, and we want to keep our fingers at the equal distance, parallel to the wheel head. Right at this point, now we start envisioning the inside profile of the bowl. Is it going to be sort of a flatter bottom and then slowly coming up, or is it going to start right from the very center and come up? I'm thinking more of starting right at the center and coming up. So that means that my fingers have to start moving up as they're being pulled out at the same time. So I'm not only pulling back, but I'm also raising my fingers up, okay?
Are you doing anything with your thumbs?
No, my thumbs are just hiding in behind.
Oh.
They're talking to each other, giving each other support, moral support.
So you're not squeezing the clay, you're just moving.
I'm just moving the clay. So it's pretty shallow. Haven't really done a whole lot here comparatively to the way things work with our cylinders. But you'll notice that there's no corners. There's just a swell down there, okay? So I'm going to start down here now, my next pull. I'm not starting at the center. I'm kind of coming over here right to the shoulder where it just starts to raise up. That's where I'm actually going to start my inside pull with my fingers. I'm going to actually scoop this clay that's on the outside here, push it up, and I'm going to start pulling. So each consecutive pull after that is going to start right where the clay starts to lift off the wheel head. We're not going to necessarily go back to the center here. There's nothing really to pull because we're leaving that little hockey puck. So getting a good bite of the clay on the outside. First pull. And with the bowls, you really want to be conscious of the lip well in advance of the final pull. So I'm probably 3 pulls away from finishing this. I already want to start being mindful of the lip being under control, okay? Again, I'm scooping most of the clay on the outside, and I'm supporting on the inside. I'm not digging in on the inside. I'm kind of digging in on the outside, and this finger is being firm, and we're just trying to really concentrate on that inside profile. There's 2 pulls. You may have noticed that the speed of, I start out with some speed, and then I slow down as I get to the top. I like to use the flexible ribs. You can throw bowls without using ribs. I kind of like to use them. This just, and the reason I like a flexible rib is that it actually goes in and compresses.
You're pulling towards you with the rib, Scott?
I'm flexing the rib, and it's catching the clay as it goes by. And this is where I should have done this actually a step back. Compressing the bottom there as well, like I was telling you about.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're still keeping the wall vertical, right?
Yeah.
Vertical on an angle.
This part of the wall?
Yeah, that from outside,
Or,
what I can see.
yeah. So looking at the inside profile of the bowl, our next pull really is just going to be from about this part up, okay? We've got that bottom shoulder already defined, and also at this point you probably want to deal with the lip. So here's probably our last pull. And I'm coming right over to where the clay sort of leaves the hockey puck on the inside, okay? And there should be a nice even transition from the sides coming right down into the bottom. There shouldn't be a little shoulder here, okay? So there's lots of clay that I've left on the outside here. We could just take our cutting wire now and pull this right off the wheel head, and that would be fine. but there is room here. And obviously, we're limited by the flange of the bowl, how wide it is. We can't come down like we did with the cylinder, so if you can, come in just a little bit and take some of that extra clay off right now. That's going to give us a nice dry spot to put our fingers under too. It seems like it hasn't even been completely thrown, right? When we're used to our cylinders, there's so much clay down here, but that's basically it. We're really just throwing from, once we open up the bottom, we're just throwing from the sides. We're just expanding that little side area.
Do you have dimensions that you used to do?
Yeah, I think I've got about 4.5 inches tall, so about this tall, and any sort of width beyond that, okay? If you get the height first, the width is kind of going to fall into place. So don't be afraid to distort this a little bit. If it folds up on you a little bit, it will always, you can always adjust that when afterwards. So, let's just put this back. You'll find the bowls just want to spring off the wheel. So, like I said, we were just kind of pulling just from this area here, so when we would come in to trim now, we noticed that the wall thickness starts to get thick right here. So we would be trimming something like that off, and this is where our foot would be. Okay? So as you get more proficient at throwing bowls, you'll find ways to actually minimize this amount of clay. Rather than leaving this on there to trim it off, you might actually be able to come in even prematurely at your second pull and kind of taper this down a little bit with your spear. You still have to leave a lot of clay here to support this swell. Otherwise your bowl is just going to fall over. And this is kind of the shoulder thing that I'm talking about here. Quite often at the beginning, you'll find that this is what happens, and you'll get this little bump in here, and that's maybe from pushing the walls out too much, making them too thin here, or after you've opened up the clay, you change the profile of this bottom part. When I first centered the clay and then opened it up, I started thinking about what the inside profile of the bowl was going to be at that point, and it's kind of set. And if you go back after 2 pulls and say, oh, you know what, I want to make this a little wider or change it, you'll find that you get these, it's like changing the foundation of your house. And it just, you won't be able to get it back again. You just keep pushing this out, and this gets out wider. You just keep pushing this down, and this one keeps getting wider. So once you've done that first one, stay away from it and start pulling just from this part up. Okay? Some mugs?
Yeah.
Want to do a mug?
Do some bugs.
Some bugs? So these ones are 1 1/4 pound balls. Hopefully you'll just find that it's really easy to handle a smaller ball of clay. That's a 2-pounder. After you've been throwing in that little piece of clay there, leave that clay on, you don't have to take it off. It really grabs onto your next ball.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, what?
I know.
Sorry about that. It's like a little sticky pad.
Boo.
You should have like when we walked in the door in first class.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie.
No, me too.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
it's the, you'll find that the clay wants to move around even less once you have that little
Okay.
coaster in there.
I'm really looking forward to that. What? I saw it on the videos,
Oh, is that right?
you know, on, yeah.
Yeah, I did see that on the.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was good. Didn't move around. Nice.
So again, think about the width of the mug that you're making when you're centering. If it's a taller, more vertical type of a mug, then try not to leave too much, because you only have a 1 1/4 pound ball here. Try not to leave too much down here if you can. Get all of it into the, almost thinking about the shape that you want right now. It's a little thick.
Are we shooting for about the thickness of a pencil again on these mugs?
Yeah.
Are there flat bottom in these mugs?
Pardon me?
The mugs will be flat bottom?
Yeah. Well, you know, if you look at those shapes, that one that has a little belly on it, a little swell, it's the one that's different from those other two. Those two have flat bottoms. It has kind of a bowl bottom in there. So if you're thinking about a mug that has that sort of profile, maybe you want to actually start with a bowl shape and then throw your cylinder out of that, and then you'll come back in and trim that down afterwards. Okay, got the flat bottom. Don't be afraid just to have just a straight cylinder with maybe those beautiful throwing lines on it, you know? Just a really well executed cylinder like that can be a good thing.
Excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
are you thinking of doing a foot on these mugs or just flat? As you throw it?
These are going to be flat, so they won't necessarily be trimmed. That's another consideration you could have if you want. I'm not expecting it, but if you want to trim a foot on these mugs, then that would be fine too. So after we deal with trimming the bowls, you'll understand how these, how you can make a foot on these as well. So
So that has to be defined right away
yeah.
to make it thicker?
Yeah, we would start this kind of like a bowl then. If we know that we're trimming a foot on there, our thickness would be thick enough to accommodate the thickness of the foot of the cylinder, but also the rise of the foot. This is quite narrow, so for the last, but the walls are even. So the last one would be more of a shaping. So it's just a simple little shape. It's not much, but By the time you get a nice glaze on there, trim out the bottom. I almost think I could come out a bit more here.
So what about lip considerations for drinking? Should we make them kind of rounded like that?
Yeah, yeah. Try to stay away from the really sharp. So there was a fair amount of clay still down on the bottom there, so it just pushed it out just a bit more. Now when I'm using my spear, so this is basically all of the trimming we're going to do. You can, after they've stiffened up and they're leather hard, turn them over and continue to shape that, trim that bottom. If you're throwing a bunch of them, obviously you don't want to be having to do that. That's more work. So if you can, try to do as much trimming right here at this point as you can.
Whoa,
Jesus.
that's beautiful.
So we can still come in if we're very careful. Take off a little more clay. You notice how a foot will just do so much to a piece. You know, we didn't have that rise before. It just seemed kind of like weighted on the bottom, and now we've trimmed that away. And the clay has a little more life to it. And on these ones, because they're a little thinner, you want to make sure that you've sucked up all of the moisture out of the bottom there if you can. I think Ari made a handy dandy little, there you go, a little mop. Chopstick works great. She's used twisty ties or hair bands?
That's a hairband.
Hairband, that's awesome. So, you know, get this wet. You can use less sponge if you want and go in there. Some people actually start throwing spouts or longer or more narrow forms, and they know that they're going to distort it by putting their hands in there, so they'll actually start throwing with those sticks on the chopstick with a little sponge and pulling up like that. So you can just touch the lip here. Okay. Did anybody make one of those little twisty clamshell fishing line cutters? Ah, thank you. So I'll bring this stuff out so you can make more of it. But this, when we're not trimming a foot on here, this is a place where you might want to use that.
And so that gives you a decorative bottom?
Yeah. So after this dries now, we could turn this upside down and come back in and trim that, or even just run our thumb across there. But just show you quickly what it looks like.
Hurts every time.
So it's a little thicker on the bottom there, but not terrible. All right? So have some fun with these. You know, just a simple cylinder can, when it's thrown well and you have those throwing lines on there, can be such a nice, comfortable thing to drink from in the morning or whatever. Don't make it hard on yourself by coming up with a really complex form. Something tapering in the middle, something with a gentle swell, maybe a narrow foot and just coming up. So see what the wheel says to you, okay? So.
I really like the shape of the middle one.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite, yeah. It's
Yeah,
just,
it's super
it's nothing
simple,
much.
yeah.
And you know what? Do you want me to do one more?
Yes, please.
I think this is a small amount. Maybe this-
Can you do a rounded one, the belly?
With the belly?
And so, which clay are you using?
I think this is the M370. So this is that Plainsman stuff. It's like kind of, it's like B-Mix. It's kind of buttery. You may find it's really, really soft. If you're using this stuff, and there's a bunch of it there available for you, on bowls, you really want to compress the bottom a lot, okay? So maybe that's probably enough.